Ki te mihi ki tēnei wā, te wā whakanuia te wiki o te reo Māori, nō reira kia kaha te kōrero, aha ko iti, aha ko nui, kei te ako tonu mātou katoa. Anei taku karakia. Tautukuhia tēnei hui, tautukuhia tēnei rōpū. Tukua mātou whakaro ki a mātou whānau hurino i te motu, hurino i te ao hurihuri. Kōrero nia nā kaupapa o te wā. Arahina te whitiwhiti kōrero kei wānganui a mātou, arahina te whitiwhiti whakaro kei wānganui a mātou, arahina nā pātai, arahina nā ture nei kia puta ai te marama, tihei mauri ora. Welcome everyone. We have no apologies by the looks of it. Okay, and no declarations of interest come forward. So we'll go straight into the confirmation of the minutes. Moved by Councillor Burdett, seconded by Your Worship. Any matters arising? I had one, just the discussions that we had on the Peel Street toilets. One of the topics of discussion was the not having the fee on the Bright Street toilet, but it's not reflected in the minutes. So just want to clarify our position on that. I think our position was that we did drop that fee. Who's that? That's Diane, is it? It was discussed, and I think we did come to a resolution on it. So.
Sorry, Michelle, it's just the questions was around the Bright Street toilets at the last meeting, whether or not the fee was agreed to be dropped at that meeting. For Bright Street.
I can't quite recall the decision. But we can drop the fee.
It was definitely a suggestion of mine that it was dropped, and I think there was agreement around the table.
Mr. Chairman, it can be reviewed from the video of the meeting, from the live stream.
All right, thank you. So nothing further. That's been moved by Councillor Burdett and seconded by Mayor Stoltz. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Action. Anything from the action sheet? Yes, Councillor Gregory.
Thank you. Just on page 18, there's a swimming pool monitoring program decision that says that it was in today's agenda. Is that apparent?
Apologies through the chair, the report won't obviously not available on this at this committee. It will need to come in future day.
Okay, and the governance plan is there for your noting. No leaves of absence, no acknowledgements of tribute. We think we did the appropriate ones yesterday. Now we have a public input and deputation, David Clark for the Tairāwhiti River restoration. David, you can step up now. And we have had a presentation on this, so if you could stick to new information if possible, please.
Sure, I'll let this click.
A clicker? Heather's clicker department.
while Heather's getting it up, I'd just like to thank the councillors and staff who came out onto the ground. Yeah, just that. That's it. Yep. Yeah, just leave it up. Yep. I'd like to thank the councillors and the council staff for coming onto the ground to look at this problem. And I think it was, well, from my point of view, and the landowners that were present too, very appreciated. And there was 5 councillors and 3 staff. So I think it was a really good turnout, and I think it was worthwhile for the councillors. So right, I was just going to start with the couple of slides here on the river, just to familiarise the map on the left was done by Nick Gordon for the council, following the overflow. And the blue circle is where the river overflowed. There's a weak point there, and the red spots were areas that he identified as blockages in the river. So you can see just immediately downstream of the blue circle, there's a number of blockages and on down. So the section to the last of the grouping there is really, I think, from my limited knowledge of hydraulics and how things work, but the amount of tree growth in the river is obviously contributing to the backup and an overflow of the river. We've got rafts there and just trees growing, and unless these trees are dealt with, they're going to get bigger and bigger and more. So I thought I'd just start with a reminder of a couple of slides there. So I think now that we're all aware of the problem, these restrictions need to be removed urgently. And we're getting close to the dry part of the year. We need to know that there's a plan to minimise the risk of the overflow happening again from low-level rain events. And it was, I guess, a medium rain event the other day that overflowed. It wasn't a big flood, but we need to get capacity back into the riverbed. A major flood will still test that pressure point. There, that was the blue circle, but we need to get the river to some form of capacity. The implications to the overflow are huge during the cropping season in this very intensively farmed part of the district there. With global warming and climate change, I think we're going to have more and more of these events, as we saw in Nelson the other day. They can come from anywhere, anytime. The crops affected by the overflow: oranges, kiwi fruit, apples, pasture, stock, maize, seed maize, sweet corn, squash, worth some millions of dollars, depending on the time and the flood, as well as the 2 domestic houses which have been badly affected. I'm suggesting a length of 1 kilometre to 1.5 kilometres needing to be cleared. And I think I put an attachment in the email that Nick Gordon, who'd done that map, he'd also done a report on the area. I was talking to Mangala the other day, and she stated that there's only $15,000 to $20,000 for the whole of the Tairāwhiti River this year, with no priorities set for this money yet. So that was my last communication there. Fulton Hogan cleared a section of my property last summer, about 200 metres, cost about $7,000 was the information I've got for one side of the river. So it's about $35 a metre. At that rate, 1.5 kilometres would cost about $100,000. My annual rate with GDC for my 3 properties is $52,000, of which $8,000 is for the Manitoki drainage scheme and the Waipawa flood control. There's only about $150 of the Waipawa, so the $7,900 odd of my rate that goes towards the Manitoki drainage or the Tairāwhiti drainage area. And I think the GDC shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there's still approximately 18 kilometres of this river times 2 sides. That is the point of an environmental disaster, and I think we all saw the councillors and staff that saw some of those sections of the river that we inspected, would agree with the problem there. So my proposal is basically to clear from the overflow area. To clear about 1.5 kilometres down from the overflow area in a planned manner to reinstate the capacity of the Tairāwhiti River to minimise the risk of damage to property, houses and crops. Will never be eliminated in a big flood, but I think we've got to try and get some capacity back in and stop this tree growth backing up the river. In the absence of adequate funds available from the council, I propose that I guarantee $100,000 interest-free to enable work to start more or less immediately. If there's no money, how do we do it? This would be work specifically in the area described above, presumably supervised by Tane at Fulton and Hogan, who I've worked with Tane for, I guess, 20 years on odd things. He's a very knowledgeable fellow. And this sort of work, opioid station would guarantee to pay the contractor's invoice by due date direct up to a maximum of $100,000, and the work to be done through to the end of the season. Any budgeted GDC work would continue and be outside this arrangement, and I'd like to be able to communicate with Tane if that was that, to just ensure the job's progressing. And I'd suggest the first repayment, and I've got the in the email, I've got the financial year of the council wrong, but if it's the 1st of July, so suggesting there that the first payment is 1st of July 2023. My $8,000 for the river work and my rates is about a quarter of the proposed amount there. Second payment 24, third payment 25, and these are just suggestions which I'm putting forward now, and open to discussion or suggestion, but I think it's an indication of how urgent I consider the work to be. So that's back on that there. So the two lines, the lines drawn from the blue circle up to there's about 1.5 kilometres approximately. So that's almost exactly where we stopped the other day with the councillors, where the right-hand line is, and that's about 1.5 kilometres. So thank you.
So thanks for that, David. The work that you did have done, that you got price, basing the price on, was that, do you think, more complex or less complex than the area that needs to be done? Because the bit that we saw, it looked really quite a complex piece of work to get it done.
Less complex.
Less complex. Oh, okay. Okay.
And one side.
Yeah. That
was one side done, whereas in some of those sections there that we saw, I think both sides need to be done.
All right, thank you. Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. Just quickly a point of clarity from staff, if I can, which is just what's our annual budget for that piece of drainage? If there's rates being taken for it.
So through the chair, for the Tairāwhiti, it's mixed in with the Waipawa flood control scheme around the work. We have around 25 to 40,000 that we spend on the Tairāwhiti, depending on which year. However, there are years where it's more, where we've got pump replacements and those things, so that can be higher again, but it is intermingled with Waipawa.
All right, thank you. And then just so we can't have discussion or debate about this and make decisions today, but I'd love to just know. So you're proposing just to clarify, you're proposing a joint venture with council and Oku Station to undertake this work as fast as possible.
I guess that's what it is. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foster.
Hey, David, what input has Runga Tairāwhiti Trust had involved with this and your proposal here?
Yes, I've spoken to Dave Pardo, who's the chairman of the Ohaka Marae, the other day, or day before yesterday, and I gave him the draft of the email that I sent to the council to forward there, and so he was in full support And I met with Soraya at the sure what her position is on Rongifakata, and got full support from them as well.
Is it possible to get written confirmation of their support?
Dave Pardo offered to send an email, but I said I don't know whether it was worthwhile or not, but could quite easily get something if it's required.
Soraya was in the site visit too, so.
Mr. Rowe was there in the site visit, yes.
Councillor Seymour.
Thank you. Thanks for coming along, presenting again. Can you just tell us how many landowners were directly affected? I know we walked it and we saw it, but how many landowners were affected by that overflow at that location?
I think it was about a dozen.
Thank you. And do you see the maintenance in the river not as active as it was once upon a time? I mean, can you tell us when the last time active maintenance was done to the river?
I spoke to Stuart Patrick the other day, earlier in the week, who had been responsible for this river system. He said the river was cleared following the Ngātapu flood in 1985, and there was maintenance work annually done by him or supervised by him, or what, I'm not sure how that worked, but up to 2005.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Nothing of any consequence since.
Thank you.
All right, if there's nothing further, yeah, I mean, what you're proposing there will need to come through the finance department, and they'll need to get back to us on that. It is outside our scope at the moment, so we'll definitely see where that can be considered.
Yeah, and I extrapolated the 18 kilometres at the $35 on two sides, and I got $1.25 million. At some point, that money has to be spent. And I don't know how it's budgeted and how long that time, what sort of time period that river is going to be maintained to a level that it should be, but approximately at that $35. There's sections that are clear, and I think I've been watching the work that's been done downstream of the city pipeline on and off for the last few months. Total waste of time. It's the widest, openest part of the river there, and it really is annoying. Several people have approached me from up the road there to say, why are they working in that area? It's the widest, openest, highest volume section of the river, and all that work's been done for the last 3 months or so in that area. So I don't know who's decided on that or where that decision's come from, but it looks a bit reactionary to me, rather than targeting and planning the job properly.
All right, thanks very much, David.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, no extraordinary business, no notices of motion, and no adjourned business. So we'll get straight into our first report on page 19. Page 19. And that's the future of refuge and recycling for Tairāwhiti.
So through you, Chair, just as Phil and Chloe are coming up. Phil is our solid waste manager and Chloe works in our waste team. So this is the work that's been done around engagement as we look to move towards wheelie bin system and trying to work with the community as to what types of wheelie bin they want, how many, because these will have quite a big impact on the collection system, the contracts and those sort of things that that we're working through at the moment. So this is an update on the feedback that we've had from our community and just where things are going. But I'll leave to the team if there are any questions from yourselves.
Right. Ms. Stoltz. First, yep.
Can I go? Is Phil going to go first? Oh, am I going? I'm not used to speaking first. Phil, so a question that I have, thank you for all the options in this paper, and it was also lovely to see the feedback you have received from the community. One thing that stood out to me, and I did read this at 2 AM last night, so I might have missed something, is that what we are proposing is double the volume of rubbish collection that goes into the tip from each household. Did I pick up correctly that under the current situation, we have one black bag, but the wheelie bins that we are proposing is double that volume? So if I'm correct, what we are doing is allowing each household double the volume of weekly collection, where I would have thought we were actively trying to discourage less rubbish per household, or just stick to the one black bag capacity. Did I read that correct?
Through you, the chair. In a way, yes. So what we went out to was the public to ask for their feedback of what they would like to see in a collection service, and that was the feedback that was given. So from there, we're going to work on options of how we can actually reduce those waste streams. So it does look like that as a start point, but when you look at further options down the track, we may be looking at green waste options. And if that becomes a weekly collection service, then technically you should have less general waste, which would mean we can look at altering that service.
So I just have a supplementary question to that. So once we make the decision and decide what combination of recycling and a normal domestic waste and green waste we have, will we then be looking at if we decide we will change the volume of household rubbish that we take, because as a council, we want to actively have less of that and more recycling, will we then have less frequency of collection, or will we right in the beginning make the decision to maybe have smaller bins?
So through the chair, what we're looking at is, this is the community feedback of what we had. What we need to look at is what's an affordable mix for our community for the rollout of those bins. If it's feasible for us to do organics, food waste, all the recycling gets taken out, then we would conversely look to make the waste bin smaller again. But we need to make sure that we can afford and that there's markets for those other products as they come out through. So the recommendation that we give will be the one that we can afford, with identified options for all of those different recycling, green waste, food waste, all of those taken out, and then we'll bring you what that looks like from a cost point of view. But a lot of that also determines the cost because of how many trucks, how many collections, weekly, fortnightly. There's significant implications for each of those, and that's what we're working through at the moment in our pricing.
Thanks a lot. Very good report.
Thank you. Councillor Gregory.
Thank you. I was wondering, when the survey, you've got 6% of people who do not support wheelie bins. Was there any opportunity for people to give a reason why they didn't support it?
Yes, people who didn't support it, they often only supported a couple of the wheelie bins and not the extra wheelie bins that we've proposed in this paper. So it wasn't the wheelie bin system as a whole, it was individual.
Okay. Also, just a comment regarding the willingness to separate waste into multiple streams. That's a great result there. Really happy to see that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Seymour.
Thank you, Madam Mr. Chair. Thank you, team, for the report. And this is something we've been talking about for a mighty long time. I think it'll be great to see. I think what really will have the big impact is actually when the dollars are associated with it, because at the end of the day, it's good to have a wish list, but it is what the impact that it's going to be on ratepayers to collect it. And while I note that quite a number of suggested they wanted a weekly collection, without boring you, you've heard me on Whakatane before, which I'm really familiar with, and only the household rubbish goes weekly and everything else goes fortnightly. And it doesn't seem to be difficult for people. And there's the 240 litre bin of green waste goes fortnightly, and people are really tidy about it. And I think the next iteration needs to say this is the financial implications for households with A, B, and C options. And I think we have to be realistic about how frequently things can be collected, and people will get into the habit, I'm sure. So thanks for the paper, but I look forward to seeing the prices.
Thank you.
I'm
Thank
happy
you.
to second it if the mover is moving it.
Moved by Councillor Mayor Stoltz and seconded by Councillor Hughes. Councillor Wharehenga.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I really want to support this paper. It's really, really great. If the mayor hadn't moved it, I would have been keen to move it. Just additionally to this, when we also I guess acquire to yourself, Phil and Chloe, I wrote what's on this week in council, and this was one of the things that I mentioned. I got feedback from a lot of the community with all of these questions. So I guess my feedback to you guys is just the education piece in regards to the decision that we're making. definitely want it to meet the financials and all of those kind of council compliance things, but also to bring the community along. And it was just things like, what's the rationale around separating all of the recycling? Why can't it just all be together? Why can't the green waste? What's the point of separating out the food waste? Just that's all of the support that's been coming to me since writing that. So again, in addition to the paper that's going back, a good comm strategy would be great too. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Sorry, yeah, that was actually my question too. Yeah, what's the destination difference between the green waste and the food waste? I mean, what's the end result? I mean, I know there's composting and all that, but if you look at grass clippings and food waste, you can put the whole lot together in a compost heap. So, yeah, could you explain that, please?
I suppose we're working through that now. Pretty much when you talk about food waste, a lot of the composting facilities can't take the food waste that attracts rodents, smells, and vermin, seagulls and things like that. So in part of your resource consent process, you need to keep those parts separate. So we're looking at if there are options to be able to combine those two, then that would be beneficial for community. If they are not possible, then we have to find the separate waste streams for both.
Okay, so it's still work in progress. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you. Great report. Thanks so much. But it would be remiss of me again to not mention the fact that I see you've got less than 1% of people surveyed who currently don't have a recycling option available to them. There are an awful lot of people who would happily recycle further out in our region if they had the facilities available to them. And I acknowledge the waste audit that you're also working on, and I would ask, the question flows across that as well, whether or not there is, again, the question, consideration of the outer rural townships having a dedicated recycling option.
It's within our next paper with waste minimisation plans, and we'll be working on options.
Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, thanks for your report. I'm not surprised that 94% of people supported it. My question is, do we understand the split between how much is curbside and how much is taken directly to the transfer station?
Yes, I haven't got those numbers for you right now, but
Okay.
we do have those splits.
Yeah, and roughly, do you know? Or just my thing is, if those bins are larger, then that's likely to kill some of those inefficiencies and people having to take it to the transfer station. And when there's fluctuations in waste week on week, having the extra capacity can sometimes potentially be quite useful. Just
Number. No, sorry, I haven't got a rough number on that.
Right. Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. I've been hot on this topic for a long time now, but I think the paper, unlike everyone else, I think it's a little bit premature. There's a lot in here that doesn't actually set out our desires and expectations and what we're trying to achieve from the wheelie bin system. For example, combination 1 is the only combination that has food waste separation, and a significant portion of the purpose of this is to separate food waste, so we have a reduction in our quantity going to landfill. And when you look at combination 1, I think the mayor undersold it a little bit with just focusing on the general waste being double the amount. Currently, we have 100 to 140 litres, depending if you've got one recycling bin or two, each week. And combination 1 equates to a maximum of 440 litres per week. So it's a much more significant increase in potential waste offsite. Doesn't promote circular economy, does promote recycling potentially, but that's I guess data without purpose at the moment in this report, and understanding where our waste can go to and what we can do with it is more important than the collection piece first off. And I raised it at the last meeting when we moved the funding to put in separation and wheelie bins, is that understanding what we do with it once we collect it is the driving force for how we should collect it and and the volumes of collection. Why increase the general waste if we're decreasing it currently by removing organic, for example? You don't need more room if you're taking stuff out of that bag. But so I really look forward to reading this in November when it comes back to the new council and seeing where council lands with it.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Kia ora, thank you, Mr. Chair. My thinking is I'm always thinking, how are we doing better in respect to waste anyway as a whole community? How much influence do we have on those companies that use a lot of packaging, in respect to our purchase consumer space too? And as we all know around this table, waste is core business of council, and we have lots of people working on all sorts of ideas around how they can, minimise, ensure, as Councillor Dowsing said, about circular economies, et cetera, et cetera. So I just, I can see in portions of the community fun times with wheelie bins as far as young people hopping in them in all of that space, knowing how young people see things like this as an opportunity, bit of fun and whatnot. So just thinking about, you've talked about this as a first kind of iteration. Thank you so much for all the feedback you've taken from the community. That's great, because that's what it comes back to, our relationship with them. So I just wondered though, can we still have an influence in getting people to compost or all those factors? Is that big report going to encompass that kind of activity? Because I guess I'm really keen to see us lessen our waste and not see it become easier to just fill up more. So because humans tend to do that more so. I'm not all, there's those that are very minded in this space. So my question is just, do we see this report and this progress we're making going to be making this whole waste management space better for the region? Because I know I'm really being keen to see the wheelie bins based on other parts of the region, but yeah, just keen to know.
Through the chair, yes, this is to reduce waste at the same time and not discourage community groups doing their own thing, to have other organisations doing composting and different workshops and things. That's still there, but it's the point is to have options and availability for those who don't have that sort of support facilities available.
Cool. And as Sandra said, obviously interested to see how we do this region well. So thank you so much again for this part of this. Looking forward to seeing where we land in this mix. So kia ora.
Do you want to comment?
Yes. I also just want to add and make it clear that implementation of a wheelie bin system is not only to separate our waste, but it is to divert a lot of waste from landfill. So by having it separate is going to address some of those issues, and that's why it's important that we do separate that. Yes, we're speaking about volumes and we want to reduce that, but we need to make a solid baseline to make sure that we do the very basics first, which is separating the waste to divert it from landfill. And as the system rolls out, we do have the flexibility to look at everyone's doing well. We can do fortnightly collections instead of weekly collections, but we really need to make sure we educate everyone well and get the very basics right with this system.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I share Councillor Dowsing's concerns insofar as this paper only really tells a portion of the story. You've just said that about separation is the aim, but actually separation diversion is admirable, but unless we have an end place or a service or a contractor to deal with that, then it's absolutely pointless. And that's the part of this report which I really, really want to see. And I don't know if you're going to be able to get that information back to us by the 10th of November. And can you clarify, is it intended that information be got back to us by the 10th of November when this comes back to us again? Simply because I read in your summary, the combinations provided are subject to contractors' ability to provide their services. Now, I'm not sure if that's collection or actual dealing with the separated diverted waste. And from the conversations we had when the waste management chap spoke to us. It didn't, it seems as if things were in flow then, but weren't solid. That's the real nub of this issue for me. So can you share any light on that, please?
So through the chair, the purpose for that 10th November paper is to bring you all of that information together to have that discussions once we've had those with waste management and then looking at the supply chain. So also remember there is already an existing supply chain in place for all of our recycling, including our organic waste. Our organic waste, green waste is dealt with here within Tairāwhiti. That doesn't leave the district now. So that stuff is dealt with here. This is around how we get the collection from people's homes to then get it to the green waste processing facility that's taking it now. And then, not organic, it's green waste. We're also looking at a number of partners around how to deal with organic waste. So we have got those conversations running in parallel, all working towards that November meeting where we'll be talking about numbers and we have the supply chain discussions that we're having at the moment around this.
So supplementary question, Mr. Chair, in relation to the current green waste, I wouldn't agree that we currently deal with all our green waste in-house because 30% of our waste going off to Tairāwhiti is green waste. And I understood the capacity issue with the local process without naming them was something which may well require resource consent, massive investment by them in the development of their site, which isn't going to happen overnight.
So through the chair, we've been working with that development and around the composition of taking the waste. They're more than comfortably taking the green waste that's separated out now. That is what we're referring to. They're able to take all of the green waste if it's separated out. They have the capacity and they're investing in making sure they can have more capacity going forward as well. They've got some very big plans for their operation as well.
Timeframes?
They'll run in line with how we're rolling out on a number of things, but I don't want to go into too much detail in a public meeting.
Councillor Worcester.
Sorry, just quickly, I note that this is really just mostly gathering the public's feedback about what they would prefer. Obviously, it shouldn't surprise anybody that they want more space, because how many people absolutely cram stuff into the limited space that they have, right? So the point I want to raise is, to what extent does our waste management and minimisation plan account for demand management? All of our waste comes from a specific number of places. We only have so many retailers in region. Are they part of our plan? Do we engage with them? I know a lot of them are franchises, a lot of them are part of bigger chains, but the feedback they collectively get from councils determines their strategic position with regards to waste. And if we are not creating those conversations, then it shouldn't surprise us that really people still have the same amount of waste, and in actual fact, just having smaller places to put it is actually not going to solve the problem necessarily. It might help with more recycling, but you're still handling recycling. But that waste, a lot of it doesn't even need to exist. So to what extent does demand management feature, or will it feature, in the work that starts in February?
So through the chair, we're engaging in a number of national conversations through the Waste Mins team and with the Ministry for the Environment. And there's a number of product stewardship schemes that are currently in place to target big box retailers, to target some of the problem waste streams that we have across the country. And that's where we're partnering to lobby at a national level around how some of that change can actually be implemented. When it comes to a local thing, part of the waste management and minimisation plan is actually to look at our problem waste streams through our solid waste analysis and then look at targeting how we can reduce some of those. So we know that construction and demolition is high at the moment. It's a high part of our waste stream, and we know it will be again, given the construction industry and the way that they're moving. So part of the WMP is to identify those waste streams and then identify solutions for those going forward. We do have a number of them locally, which are great, but it's in how do we look at some of the other problematic waste streams and make sure that we've got options for those. Some we can do local solutions, some require a national effort.
All right, thanks for that. Been a robust discussion. It's essentially a noting report with an indication of work in progress. So it's been moved by by Mayor Stoltz and second by Councillor Hughes. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Page 29. Oh, solid waste. Haven't talked about that for a while. 29.
So through the chair, this was an update on a couple of issues that the committee had been asking about. So we've brought these up just in a quick report to show where we're sitting. It was around fly tipping. You were asking about volumes and the Resource Recovery Centre feasibility. We've just got the draft back. So we just thought we'll bring those to the committee while we had the paper on, just so that you'd be able to see them all in one place. Happy to take any questions on it.
Okay. Councillor Foster, Councillor Billy.
Yeah, thank you. Just page 31, illegal dumping. it's really disheartening to see that there's been a big increase in illegal dumping. It's really frustrating, actually. So my question, even with the less request for services, we've got a bigger increase, 161 tonnes. So my question is, you identified Inner Street, which I guess is out in front of the recycle centre. Has that been, people been dumping their rubbish there? At least it's close to the site, I guess. That's one consolation. But is there any other identified sites? I mean, you're saying you've got cameras that haven't really picked up anything as yet, but one would think that down the Mad Mile would be a pretty common area for dumping, as it has been in the past. And if you had cameras down there with trailers going down, it would be quite suspicious. So, has there been any particular areas where illegal dumping has increased more so than previous?
Through the chair, illegal dumping is ongoing. There's the hot spots that are always the same: Titarangi, the Mad Mile, Waimata Valley Road. And it's just an ongoing issue. There are cameras out, but it's trying to get good imagery of anything has been proving difficult.
When recreational services go around, I mean, I see at Kauri Beach all the time, people are dumping rubbish bags there the whole time by rubbish bins. Is that included in illegal dumping, or is that just an ongoing part of what recreational services do and it's not monitored?
So rec services will they'll do litter collection, they'll empty the bins. If there's a bag next to it, they will take it. If it's a larger volume, then it'll be captured under illegal dumping as well.
Oh, okay, so that's captured under illegal dumping. Yeah, okay, cool. Because I have noticed a big increase. And then hats off to recreational services. They're doing a fantastic job, and they go around the rubbish bins. There's always rubbish all around rubbish bins, especially around the area that I am, and they're cleaning it up all the time. So yeah, big heads up to them. They do a fantastic job. Yeah.
Councillor Biddy.
Landfill is not in the solid waste update. The consent is up in 225. Things are getting very, very tight there. There have been 4 managers of operations, 1 contractor who does an excellent job right through, but they can't keep going up in the air. The space is very tight, plus the added risk to right at present. I mean, it's a very valuable asset for the people of the coast. Most of those transfer stations come in there, the stuff's brought in there and then transferred on to Gisborne. But the latest risk, and the one that I consider the most dangerous, is the changing course of the river, which is there's still quite a bit of leeway between the river and the landfill itself. However, it's our role to make sure that that's protected, because, as I said, the consent is up at 225. I assume it's our intention to close it. I'm just making the point that we have a responsibility to have a good look at the whole situation in terms of the contractors going up in the air. Those are his instructions, and that river could, a major fresh, cause us some real headaches. And I repeat, Tairāwhiti.
Just to reassure the committee, we do monitor the river and its distance from the Waipu landfill. We're comfortable where it sits at the moment, because it's the Waipu and it will go where it will go. But we would definitely intervene before it hit the landfill.
Thanks, Lee. Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, firstly, just good to see the Paukahu landfill conversation moving forward, and there's a date set for that. Secondly, just around that illegal dumping, how much of the increase is due to the increase in industry? Oh, the increase in dumping, it's one of the points noted is that it's due to additional fly tipping on the roadside in the street. Is that treated tracked separately or no?
Through the chair, it's captured. It is kept separate. They do send an RFS. They advise us each day of how much is coming through there. The volumes, as you can see, have changed over time, but that volume's been pretty consistent throughout.
And in terms of the cost of collection, is that kind of risen by the same portion?
Sorry, was that?
The cost of collection of illegal dumping, is that risen by similar proportion to the actual weight of the?
Yes, there's a direct correlation between the volume and the cost,
Yeah.
particularly around the weights, but then also in the last 2-3 years, we've also had fluctuations in the cost of everything. This is not exempt either.
Yeah, I was just wondering if some of the cost is down to collection and some of it's down to the actual dumping of it, I guess. Just one.
Thank you. Councillor Seaman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the paper. With respect to Pokahu, I have two questions. How long is it since the material was provided to the other party? Because this is something that's been swirling around for years and we don't seem to be advancing. Have they had it for ages or just a short time?
Through the chair, they've had it. I was speaking with the trustee earlier this year.
And have we followed up to ask them for a response? Because it is really important that the remediation is undertaken, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, I've been following up with them and will continue to.
Okay, thanks. I'll leave that one there. With respect to the Resource Recovery Centre, and this is something else we've talked about for a long time, it would be great to get that happening. I see it's reported that the more information will come before us and potentially one for the coast and one in town. Would it be expected that some funds towards that would be able from that waste minimisation levy? Would that be 100% or what? Or can that be investigated so that when the paper comes back, we understand how it can be funded outside of this council?
So through the chair, we very much have been talking to the Ministry for the Environment about the waste levy being part of the funding for this, and it's how significant a part. It's something that obviously we'd be keen to put our funding that we get from the levy towards it, but very much looking for a top up from the Ministry for the Environment, similar to what they've done in other places. So they have given considerable assistance to a number of resource recovery centres across New Zealand, and we'd be looking for something similar.
Great, thank you very much. That would be excellent.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
In relation to Pokahu, will the remediation work, require resource consent? Any of it?
So through the chair, depending on the works that we're going to do, if it's the remediation, we have current consent to do a number of things there now. Anything that was going to open the cap up or do something different, we'd absolutely have to look and see what discharges are going to have to be done for that, but we'd need to take advice depending on what engineering work is going to be done.
The supplementary, the report from Tompkins and Taylor, I think it is, does any of those recommendations, which that paper is sitting with the trust at the moment, would that require resource consent? I'm just trying to get an understanding of the timeframes because you haven't had a response from the trust yet. You've got a HUI program here for next month and you're expecting to start the remedial works in March next year, I think it is. Want to make sure we don't trip ourselves up.
So through the chair, some of those remedial options are around pump replacements, pipe replacements, which are simple business as usual. Some of the other options are far bigger and we'd have to work through the cost of those at this table, but actually working through the number of different options with the Tairāwhiti Trust, right? And the options range from digging everything out to how do we actually make sure that we're looking after it. And so it's around the remedial options of things will start in March, not some of the larger works. Those are bigger conversations we need to have with the community and with the trust.
Final question then, given those conversations are still to be had with the trust and to discuss the options you've just highlighted, including digging the whole thing out through to whatever, would it not be prudent then to bring a paper back to us post the discussion with the trust to see where their thoughts lie?
So through the chair, our intention is to meet with the trust to discuss the options and then bring a paper back to the committee. And that's particularly as part of the WMP review work. That would help inform that because that also covers off the closed landfills within the district as well.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to move the paper, which I meant to say at the time.
Councillor Akarata Brown.
I just thank you really. Point 10 on page 32. We are working toward promotion of disposal options. I know that there are portions of the public that just do not know where to get rid of whiteware and microwaves, televisions, computers, etc., etc. So thank you that you are working on that promotion. I was just thinking possibly, I mean, one of the best places to do some promotion in this sense is schools, but also kainga water homes, you know, looking at options to ensuring, because I know that when I drive down Stanley Road, Mr. Newman's property just goes through that flux of people just dumping their stuff there, you know, and then he's got to clear it out as per his role in the space. So people do presume there are spaces they can just take stuff to because they see it sitting there. So I'm really keen to support you in respect to that information being spread as far and wide, because I do know a lot of residents that just have no idea where to take certain parts of their waste. So it just gets dumped, and some of it's the fly tip stuff as well, as far as mattresses, etc., etc. So thank you, but certainly keen to support that kaupapa. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you. I know you guys are full of probably more bright ideas than the rest of us could put together, and it just comes down to the funding. But Councillor Seymour raises an interesting point, and something that I've often wondered how we could fund. Our summer period, when our population just explodes with both visitors and whānau and families coming home, and in particular along the coastline, be it camping or batching or whatever. I do wonder whether or not there's an opportunity with the MFE levy to explore the shipping container recycling option that we've seen. You know, you've often heard me talk about the Marlborough Sounds, for example. It sort of flows into the conversation that we had earlier about getting people used to the idea of separating their waste and working with the city options of recycling. And I just wonder whether or not there's something could be done there in the way of, I know you're looking at hardware that you'd have to buy, and indeed human resource in order to service it, but it could then flow into some of our smaller communities as well.
Through the chair, short answer, yes, it is on our radar. Shipping container style trailer units that can be moved for different events or different facilities, different communities. So it is something that is in the pipeline being looked at.
Mayor's thoughts.
Thank you. I have a few questions in regards to, on page 30, I would like to talk about the Tairāwhiti Environment Centre, and I do want to congratulate them for the great work they are doing. I actually have a visit scheduled there tomorrow to take a look firsthand at what they are doing. But I remember my first activity as a new councillor in 2010 was collecting waste at the old railway station, where people for the first time then, and some councillors joined me there, could come in and dump their computers and the type of e-waste. And it is just so heartening to see that since then, this trial has happened where people know there's a safe space where they can take this e-waste. And I do want to compliment them on, as technology evolve and our uses change. If you think 10 years ago, a family would have one computer and they might hang on to it for 10 years. Now, things are designed now to get dumped, and it's sad, and recycled every 3 years. So I'm just glad to see that this trial has collected more than 10 tons of e-waste. The question I have in regards to this is, it's mentioned it was a trial at number 3. Will this be ongoing for the Tairāwhiti Environment Centre to be a safe space for people to take their e-waste and we then get rid of it responsibly? Or is the trial coming to an end as noted, or it's called a trial in point 3?
Through the chair, this trial is coming to an end, and they do have to apply for more funding or further funding from MFE to also continue to run this program. But in the interim, they will continue to collect e-waste.
And then just as users change as well, I note the coffee pots, as someone that enjoy maybe one coffee a week, it's just wonderful. I take my pods there as well, and you should see the volume that they can recycle there. So it's wonderful to see how they change over time as our users change and as communities and society change. But yes, I will be a big supporter, and if we can walk alongside them to secure that funding from MFE, because e-waste is not going to go away. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. My questions were really a little bit around the operational nature of dumping and illegal dumping. Noticed a couple of concerning dumping practices that when I've been there, which is that industry uses, or sorry, not industry, but businesses taking recycling, primarily recycling into the landfill simply because of access to the bins. For example, ute loads full of bottles from bars being dumped into the waste because they don't have time to manually take up trays and trays and trays of bottles and sort them. Is there a better option for that? Likewise, I've seen vans full of cardboard from companies as well getting thrown in there. So perhaps better commercial access to recycling streams than front of house. So that was just an observation. On the illegal dumping side of it, I wonder where the tipping point is for cost. At the time when we start collecting 161 tons of fly tipped material and having to handle it and still take that volume to landfill, I wonder when it becomes a tipping point where it's better off to just open the gates and not have the burden of cost and remove and potentially remove the majority of fly tipping altogether. I understand that it then falls on the ratepayer. It's not like it's a free activity, but I don't know the associated total cost of waste in region. I don't know what part of that is assigned to collection and income over the weighbridge versus the illegal tipping. So I don't know where the balancing point is for that.
Through the chair, I can't say the actual number, but it would be significant to move that. It'd be unaffordable for us to the tipping point around having those gates open to be able to take it in that way. There's a significant volume of waste that still goes over the transfer station at Inner Street. We're hoping that the implementation of easier access with wheelie bins, less bags, all of those things, that should help reduce the fly tipping. And that's one of the big drivers for it, is around having better options for the community and then seeing what the knock-on effect from that is.
Yeah, supplementary, I guess the other part to that would be how you define between an industry user and a household user in terms of that waste stream coming in, because I wouldn't expect to have it open to industry and see piles of old timber being dropped in there and that kind of thing from construction or bricks, you know.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Just following up on Councillor Dowsing's point, do we have a breakdown of the fly tipping, the makeup of it? I'm sorry if it's in here, just because if, for example, it's whiteware, you know, Councillor Akasha Brown asked the question, but Metal Co will take fridges, washing machines, they just take it for free. And I dump all my stuff there. I mean, is it a case of people dumping stuff that if we had a day, or every 6 months we had a day where people could put whiteware out and that was specifically collected, would that help address the fly tipping? Do we know the breakdown of it, or is it just all sorts of rubbish being dumped at different times?
The chair, it's pretty much everything. There's not a single item or single stream of waste that is being dumped. It's a combination.
Yeah, I'll back that up. I've cleaned a bit of fly tipping up in the past few years, and it seems to me to be, if it fitted on the trailer at the time, it's on the trailer and it goes. Yeah. Thanks. It is just a note report. Everyone's had a bit of a spiel on that, and it's been moved by Councillor Seymour and seconded by Councillor Akuara Brown. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Fleet is no. I'm going to get, see, 10:15 it says here. I'm going to hit it. I'm on a, yeah. Fleet update, page. Fleet update, page 34. Thank you. And we'll take it as read. Anyone? Councillor Hughes.
Just one quick question on page 35 around passenger vehicles. Is that quite standard across councils, the kilometre limit and age limit?
Sorry, which page?
Just page 35, passenger vehicles being qualifying for replacement after 90,000 kilometres or 3 or 4 years. Yeah. Is that quite a common thing?
got Graham and Simon here. If you give me a
Graham and Simon. Oh, got a tag team coming up.
So just to introduce Simon June and Graham McLean at Lifelines, they, for their sins, also look after the fleet amongst a number of other things, and Simon in particular, the electrification of the fleet and the purchasing of the vehicles, and Graham looks after the actual going and buying and then the maintenance and all those sort of lovely things as well.
Just curiosity from myself. I know when, well, it's probably 6 or 7 years ago, we did a rationalisation of the fleet, and quite a lot of the fleet was sold off, and it was actually sold off on Trade Me. How many vehicles do we sell a year at this stage? And is it of a number that it could be more efficient to just do it on Trade Me rather than going down to Napier and going through Turners and Turners, who will have a significant commission? Yeah, it was Lindsay's initiative. Was he just gave it to one staff member to sell them on Trade Me, and it was very successful. Yep, that's you.
We would then have to become trade sellers, and that can become a bit of an issue. If we sell through Turners, we do not have to become sellers. Under the present scheme, we're allowed to sell 6 cars per year, and then it stops. So for us, it's more beneficial to sell through Turners.
So how many do we sell a year?
Last year, we sold 9 cars.
9, so just missed.
And
no, that's
so
fine.
to be fair, I also think with Turner's auctions, it's transparent, and we actually have the ability to turn around and say, this was sold on this day for this price. So if anybody ever questioned us, I can say it was sold throughout New Zealand and this is what we got.
What is the commission?
Depending on the vehicle that we sell it about just under 2%.
2.
Yeah.
Oh. Cool. Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. I gave it a shot to extract a bit more information on email as was tabled. And I appreciate the report, first of all. Clearly states our policy, clearly states that we're in line with our policy. Doesn't, and then I send the email because it doesn't give us a lot to actually analyse and consider. So I think, again, it highlighted in the answers received that there'll be a utilisation report in October, and I think that's when, realistically, council should be informed again and given some, given that information, because it's because the reason this came to council was because we wanted to know whether our fleet was being optimised, not whether it was within policy. So again, we'll have to leave it to the next council, but thank you very much for the paper. Happy to move it.
Thank you. Councillor Akwata Brown.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you so much for the report and all this space, the mahi that goes on in this. I was just interested to know, because I know I've used one of them, the e-scooters, like, do they sit within this space, and does council also own cycles, bikes? I know that there's been lots of conversations around moving into a, well, I guess promotion of those frameworks, but I just didn't see them feature. Is it because they're in a different vehicles situation?
We always encourage people to use the e-scooters through the summer months, and we do actually ask all new staff members to at least get trained on them. To give you an idea that we continue to improve our electric vehicles, we have just purchased an electric bike for our pest and plant staff. So we have improved things. So, yeah.
Councillor Robinson.
Thanks. Paragraph 5 of the report, page 35, cites, I think it's clause 6 from the policy, which talks about council has a responsibility to ensure that vehicles have a low impact on the environment. When choosing replacement vehicles, environmentally friendly models will be chosen, having first satisfied safety and fitness for use requirements. Now, there's no mention there about affordability. However, that rationale is given in this report at paragraph 9, that There are no currently EVs or PHEV utes that fit these criteria at reasonable prices. Now, I see Simon sitting there, the money man. But I would say that we're not following our policy at the moment because the policy doesn't say that affordable is one of the conditions. It says that it's will replace vehicles that are environmentally responsible and are fit for purpose, unless the definition of fit for purpose is affordability, but that's not my understanding of fit for purpose. So comment on that first, please.
So through the chair, I'll touch on it, and then Simon can fill in any gaps. So we buy all of our vehicles through the all of government purchasing price, which is a list of vehicles that have been negotiated rates with suppliers for the whole country, and we buy them at the all of government discount rate for those. Our biggest issue we have is having fit for purpose vehicles that can be electric. So we don't have things. So for our pests and plants team, Kerry and the catchments team, the drainage teams, they go off-road a lot. We need four-wheel drives for what they do. Similar to journeys and a lot of the staff, they actually have to have four-wheel drives given the nature of the jobs that they do. So the biggest issue is actually fit for purpose. There's nothing on the market that can replace our four-wheel drives at the moment that's electric, and there's nothing on the all of government purchasing list that we can buy either when it comes to that. So when it comes to affordability, they're not on those lists yet, and you were saying 2 to 3 years away minimum before we'll start to see the first ones that could start to replace some of our four-wheel drives, but there's nothing on the list at the moment.
Okay, we just said 2 to 3 years and the report says 6 to 12 months. Are you really seriously saying that 72% of the vehicles fit in that parameter? 72% of the vehicles sitting out there are required to go off-road, because I've had inspectors turn up at my place driving a ute in town, and that could have been an EV. I mean, seriously, are we really seriously taking the rationalization responsibly seriously? Because I don't think this paper nails it. I cannot believe that all those 68 vehicles, every minute, 68 sitting out there, are required to be able to go off-road round region. I would have thought maybe 15 or 20 that people can tag team on to use, because on any given day, surely there's not 68 staff out in those vehicles needing non-EV utes.
For instance, our animal control vehicles are specifically fitted out for animal control. As you can understand, when we first bought the animal control vehicles, we had to make sure that our staff were safe. So we fitted it with a crane and the ability for our staff to be able to pick animals up safely. So that's 8 or 9 vehicles. So they have to be four-wheel drive as well. We have our staff, our pest and plant staff who drive off-road all the time. They have to have four-wheel drive.
I'm not debating that point, but the reality is you're saying 68 vehicles are required to be of that status, which means all the time. Now, I can't understand why we shouldn't have some of those, for example, based up the coast, where someone could drive an EV up to Tairāwhiti and then take the ute to go and attend to stock management,
So through the chair, can I just clarify, these vehicles are also used in all conditions all year round. These are the fleet that the building inspectors you're talking about, Councillor Robertson, will also be going to look at pole sheds on a farm. In an emergency, we'll be utilising those same vehicles for inspections going out in a flood, all of those things. So these vehicles aren't dedicated to just doing one function. They could very much be disappearing up into the bush, doing investigations there. So we need to have four-wheel drive capability for those vehicles, but also, as Graham said, they're interchangeable amongst the fleet as well. So yes, for some of them, they around town, we've moved those cars out from four-wheel drive, and that's been a progression over the last 5 years since Graham and Simon have been doing the fleet, to move things away from everybody having one to actually you need to have a business case for why you need to have one now. And it's a lot of it comes down to where you need to go, where especially in an emergency, we have to have that capability.
Thank you, Councillor Worston.
Yeah, I just, as someone who spends a lot of time on the roads, I would love it, absolutely love it, if it was possible for our fleet to convert to something that didn't require four-wheel drive. At the moment, your state highways are not passable with a two-wheel drive in places. You literally, if you leave the city, you will need a four-wheel drive at some point virtually, at some stage during the year. So it's a function of the fact that we are a regional council as well as a district council. And the reason that so few of the vehicles that we have are suitable to be electric is because the driving that happens in town, like we are quite a compact city. You can do a lot of that with not very many vehicles. But as soon as you leave and you're heading in all sorts of different directions, you don't have too many options. And my fear is that when there are options, we're going to be obliged to buy them, but they're actually probably still not going to hold up to our roads. And that's like you see that with the electrics and the current vehicles that are diesel. The first thing that goes is something electrical. So we have challenges ahead of us. I don't dispute for a minute that there are options within the city boundary, but beyond that, sadly, there aren't many. And that's not even to mention the fact that our electric charging station suffered quite a terrible fate up the coast.
Councillor Seymour.
Thank you, Madam. Mr. Chairman, I was going to respond along similar lines to Councillor Worsnop, and I wanted to note, I'm probably one of the people that asked for this paper, and I can remember when this vehicle fleet was over 112 cars. So we've made big strides in reducing the size of the fleet, and I'm sure our council officers are really aware of the issues. And I can't help but concur with Councillor Worsnop on the state of our roads and the fact that we need to be accessible. So thanks to the team for the work you've put in already. And I don't belong to the ilk that think you have to rush off and have an electric vehicle the minute they become available.
Thank you. Councillor Brilliant.
Mr. Chairman, Tony, I want to particularly defend our stock people. Those trucks are absolutely necessary. I myself have been out at times in the middle of the night to assist these guys putting stock off the road or putting them into paddocks or putting them into yards. And they're necessary. They've got to cover from the top end of the coast, the Waikura Valley, right down into Tolaga. They're based in Tapuia, and there's another one based in Rangitukia. So those vehicles are absolutely necessary. But I do have a question, and it's out of left field, Mr. Chairman, to these gentlemen, given they're in charge of the vehicles. Where is the stock truck that belongs to Tapuia? Let me explain. It was bought specifically to service the coast. And talk about getting fobbed off. I've spoken to, I'm not going to mention names, I've spoken to from the head of the department down, and not even a responding phone call. I've doubled up on that and still no response. I've been told casually they don't need a stock truck because there hasn't been any pounding. Well, how the hell are they to do their job if they don't have a stock truck? Please inform me.
I'm happy to answer that question today. So we've had clarification. The stock truck will arrive here, a brand new stock truck. It will arrive in November. It will be fitted out with the existing crate to save council money, and it will be on the road, and we will have it ready for you. I'm going to say in the first week in December, Christmas present, early Christmas present.
Who said we don't? Who said we don't give Councillor Burdett a going away present? All right.
I'll even let you drive it. How's
I just
that?
wanted to make one last comment as someone who used one of the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. And it works very well when you pop around town. So if I plug it in at night, it gives you less than 50 kilometers. So when you do then travel around town, go to a few meetings, your battery power is gone. But why you need that petrol capacity as well, because when I open a playground in Tairāwhiti, I travel 375 kilometers in one day, and you need to be able to do that without thinking. Sometimes when I go on the Radio Ngāti Pro, I'll plug in my car and charge it for that hour. But we also need to be realistic about the use for a vehicle, where it's used, also the cost, because you can buy a battery vehicle for me at an exorbitant cost that can maybe do 400 or 500 kilometers on a battery. But if we're really realistic and looking after ratepayers' money, we would strike that balance where we do have both capabilities and then make sure it's fit for purpose, but it is also balanced when we budget.
Thank you. Councillor Sheldrake, you got one, sir. 15 seconds.
No, I think this is moving well in the right direction. I think in 2 years' time, this will be an incredibly different conversation when those SUVs, whatever, come available with four-wheel drives, and someone who's actually driving a few Ks a time to get to council now on those roads. I absolutely endorse Councillor Horsnop's comments.
Thank you. Just a voting report being moved by Councillor Seymour and seconded by Councillor Worsnop. All those in favour? Or against? Carried. Nailed it. Cup of tea. United Sports Club lease, page 44, and I see we've got Abby here. And it's been moved by Councillor Burdett. Hang on, sir. Don't rush, don't rush. Wait till we all get sit.
Yeah, not only at the time of the confirmation of the lease, but council guaranteed a $90,000 loan from the bank for the club and appointed trustees at the time in consultation with the club to ensure that the administration was sound. And I understand that loan has been paid back quite a number of years ago. So the council played a major role in the establishment of this building in Toka.
Apologies, Abby. Obviously, Bill was pretty keen to get in there first. I'd usually give you the first opportunity.
Sorry, Abby, go on, Karen.
So, you want to just take it as read, or do you want to reiterate anything? Okay, cool. See, did you want to say something, Isaac? No? Councillor Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All we're doing though is actually agreeing to negotiate the lease. We don't have the terms and conditions here, and we don't have tenure. So I hope we come back with something really satisfactory. And we need to ask the leasing department to look at how many other properties whose leases expired in 2014 are sitting out there with unrenewed or non-renewed, I should say, non-renewed leases. So I was happy to move a second if that's been done. I just think that needs to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. No, he's out. Councillor Worsnop.
I just want to reinforce what Pat said. I've been trying for 2.5 years, and it's gone a bit silent because Tairāwhiti have struggled to get themselves together for the last 8 months. But there was a concerted effort ages ago to try and get a lease sorted on the Scout Hall in Tikaraka, and they were kind of handed over between various different people, and absolutely nothing's come of it. They can't get sponsorship for the building. They can't do anything. So I wonder, I feel like do we have a strategy with regards to actual community facilities that the community run? And if we don't, why don't we? Why is it such a mess?
Through the chair. So there is a lot of work happening in the space at the moment. We completely acknowledge that there are a number of leases that have expired. We have recruited a principal advisor to assist us with the development of a community occupancy policy, a prioritisation of the leases that have expired and which ones we take forward in which order. And we do have a series of these leases coming forward in the coming months. So we're doing all we can to deal to the issue, and this is one of the first ones.
Supplementary to that, I've got a meeting, it'll be my last meeting with Tairāwhiti. What do I tell them?
Through the chair. So we're in the final stages of this community occupancy policy, which will inform the way we set our leases and the fees that we charge. So that will be ready late this year or early next year. So depending on the council process. So that will be coming forward in a form to council, and we are going to continue to process our leases with urgency.
So sorry, just so I'm clear, the policy is going to be late this year, early next year.
Yeah.
But the leases are going to proceed in advance of that.
We are, yeah, so we're continuing, we can't hold off from doing processing leases. So we're continuing to process leases where there's certainty, and that is in general accordance with the direction. So we're not going to just stop all lease processes, but yeah, but we are working towards that approach through the policy.
I think what I'm asking is, even if you can't provide it now, is for there to be some timeline that you can at least give these. I mean, you've got volunteers in the community who are giving your own time, and it's feeling like so a lot of their time has been given fruitlessly. And so if you could determine a timeline and get back to, I mean, I presume that Tuaki is probably only one of many, and give them a bit of a line of sight of what's happening, because there was an expectation that it was going to be resolved probably a year ago, and it's not a good look for us. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Councillor Around, just if we can keep it onto the Tokomaru at this stage. I know there's a propensity to make comparisons and that, but if we could get back to the paper, Councillor Brown.
Thank you. And listen, I just want to say thank you very much for this paper, and also in light of our recent world we are living in, these facilities really are a core kind of need, with regard to these rural communities, small communities, and Tokomaru Bay obviously well using this space, having been there for a couple of gatherings now. But so I'm really grateful that we are ensuring that we as a council are supportive and in the sense of the lease space. But I just, in my view, how we add value to this conversation really is obviously they're looking at broadening the scope to this rangatahi space and all of that planning that they've got in their heads to make the space that community hub that it is. But building on that, I think it's really important that we see them being able to push onto NZTA the construct that, because they're building these spaces, but they need good roads to access them, with all due respect to State Highway 35. So I was just wondering if do we let in regards to relationship and partnerships, that knowledge that you're going to see gatherings at these spaces, so we need to ensure the roading is safe and in the sense of it. So do we do that kind of speaks through plans and partnerships? Sorry, Mr. Wilson.
Through the chair, this is about the Tokomaru Bay lease for the Hatiarangi. So can we please stick to that?
Yeah.
Well, I just think that whenever we have a paper like this,
excuse me, he's quite right. The paper's about the Tokomaru Bay
supplementary,
lease.
then let me come back to that then. Let's not talk roads, it does touch on them. With regard to our role then, so we've been to a few spaces. So council can, through our relationship with Tokomaru Bay, use that facility for council business.
Sorry, through the chair. Yeah, there's this project for the Rangatahi zone, if we remember, is one of the early wins projects that sits in the community facilities or Tairāwhiti sports facilities business case. So there's a lot of support for all of these projects where Trust Tairāwhiti has in principle funded a significant amount to get these projects up and underway. There are other external funding opportunities that are being explored by the groups that are, or community-led groups that are designing these projects, and that's very closely supported by council staff, myself and colleagues, and I think there is definitely conversation there to be able to look at how we can I guess one of the key investment principles is maximising use and most efficient use. So all of those aspects come into those conversations. How can we activate that space as much as possible so that participation, activation in those buildings and investments is 24/7.
Yes, well, because we've been asked that as in regards to meeting with community, having community events in rural communities as such. So it's about having what spaces are available that we can access when our constituent ratepayers want to meet with us. So that's really what I was asking is, so we can know we have access to a space that can be useful. Hui, kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsing.
I was just going to ask you, put it we're not going to get anyone speaking opposed to the paper.
Yeah, I just had a question about 3 on page 46, which is expired on 31st January 2014 with no further right of renewal. Why do we do that? Is there a reason we put no further rights of renewal?
Through the chair, yes, these council reserves are governed by the Reserves Act, and the maximum amount of time that you can have a fixed lease on a council reserve is 33 years, and we often will set that up in a period of 11 years with 2 11-year rights of renewal, and that will come to an end.
So the rights of renewals have come to an end. Yeah, okay, that's fine. All right, it's been moved by Councillor Burdett and seconded by Councillor Hughes. All those in favour? Against? Carried. And we're on to the Makorori Master Plan update, page 51. Thanks, Abby. And Tyler. Tyler, I got information that you might have a support crew.
Yes, not for this one.
Not for this one. Okay. All right, so there's livable spaces. We've got Tyler here. Anything you want to update us on, or take it as read?
Yeah, taking it as read, I suppose, probably as an overview, the intent here is to simply provide an update and an overview of the summary of consultation that's taken place so far on the Makorori Master Plan. As a reminder, the Master Plan is a spatially focused planning exercise. So it's looking at the land from point to point, ridge to sea, across multiple land ownership parcels to plan for how we protect and enhance that across 20 to 30 years. The key issues that have come through in the consultation to date really have been dune degradation, vehicle access to the dunes and the beach, and planning for car parking and amenities in the face of ever-growing recreational use and pressure. Probably overwhelmingly in consultation, it's been apparent how aligned stakeholders, community, mana whenua have been on those issues. There are a couple of interesting pinch points or pieces that we're going to have to delve into a little further, but largely on the big issues, everyone cares about the same thing, supports the planning approach, and is eager to see something put in place that gives a longer term vision for development and enhancement. Moving forward from here, we expect the draft plan to be produced November, December this year and out for consultation early in the new year.
Thank you, Tyler. Councillor Seymour.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you very much, Tyler, for your report. And I've been at one of the meetings that Tyler had with the community. I just want to endorse his comments in there, page 53, bullet points 14, 15, 16 and 17 at the top of the page. They are absolutely key. The dune restoration, it is really, and I'm going to say it bluntly, really irritating to see how bad the dunes have been degraded again this winter. Every time it gets wet, people drive all over them and just make one terrible, terrible mess. And frankly, I feel ashamed that we've taken this long to do anything about that particular aspect, because that is what's really bad at the southern end of the beach. And that's what everybody wants to see protected. They do not want to see those dunes continually driven all over. And it is degrading them, so that if we have sea level rise and if it continues, then that part of the beach is going to be eroded faster than any other. So those other points are the impact of vehicles on the beach, because this is the beach that many urban people use as alongside Waikanai and Wainui, but many people go out there because it's such a lovely, safe beach for day trippers. So we want to keep it that way. So they don't want cars driving up and down the beach, and a bylaw committee here did try to do something about that, reducing the amount of speed. The one thing I do think that this council will need to think about, though, is the request or the suggestion on page, again, 53, item 18, the lack of toilets and the poor quality of the public facilities. there are two very good toilets, one at either end of Makorori, and you think about the cost to maintain toilets across Tairāwhiti as a whole, and we've all discussed this many, many times. So I think that maybe that isn't something that we can realistically think of plonking yet another toilet in the middle of Makorori. Seriously, we can all walk 100 yards to the toilet if we're at the beach and need to go, one would hope. So when you come to discuss that and decide what resources are going to be made available, I would caution about the additional cost of that. And yet you could have nice seating, some picnic tables, some formed car parking areas, and some bollards, please, to keep people off A, the dunes, and B, the beach. So well done to your team, because it's been slow progress, but we are getting there. So I look forward to reading about what the decisions are made. And I want to acknowledge the Makorori community who've been hot on the subject for ages. They haven't given up. They do really care about their beach. They're very happy to share it with the public at large, but they want to see it protected. And again, back to the subject we had earlier, there is regrettably some dumping that happens along Makorori Beach again, because people can drive to under a tree and hide concrete, metal, black plastic bags, all sorts of things that I've RFS'd about. So hopefully the bollards will actually restrict some of the access to fly dumping. So I absolutely support the paper, and the sooner we can get it happening, the better. And we did mention to Whakakotahī as well that they need to see stumping up with some contribution towards the bollards along State Highway 35 to limit the number of access ways. So it shouldn't fall just to the ratepayers, it should fall to share from Whakakotahī in that protection. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Seymour. Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, a great paper, and good to see the progress of this. Being an interested party at Makorori, it would be nice. I mean, I'm just wondering why there hasn't been an invite to any councillors to some of these community reference group meetings, because you know, we've been really passionate about Makorori for a long, long time, and it would be nice for at least to get an invite to go along to these community meetings, whether we, you know, whether councillors go or not. I'm sure interested ones, particularly, you know, being Pat's ward, she would have been interested to go along there had she had known. And I've been an interested party of that area for a long time. I would certainly go. So yeah, if that invitation could be extended to councillors, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wharehinga.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for the progress on this kaupapa. I really appreciate it. I did just want to, I guess, query the advice, or who's giving this consultancy Roku the advice in regards to the mana whenua to engage. I just want assurance that we're kind of engaging correctly. Just noting that they're not from here. You know, that's the only. My only kind of concern in regards to this. Sorry?
So that has been a piece of the consultation that we've held quite tightly as council. So using our internal resource and connections to engage through Ngāti Onioni and be directed to the most appropriate people.
Through who, sorry?
Through Ngāti Onioni.
Through Ngāti Onioni. No, yeah, I know. I'm asking. The question is wider than the part that's just in here in regards to mana whenua. So, okay, just to be more direct, did we engage with Te Runanga o Ngāti Porou in order to be able to have wider conversations with Te Runanga iwi, mana whenua over that area?
We have reached out a couple of times early in the process to give an overview of the mahi and extend an invitation to workshop it further. We haven't had conversations beyond those updates.
Yeah, and it was generally more about who was in control of that to give me reassurance rather than the specific details of who has been. Yeah, so thank you, Tyler.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Following upon Councillor Wharehinga's concerns, I had a similar nervousness, particularly I read the section on the SIS report. How's that pronounced? SIS? Exist?
Exist.
Oh, exist. Right. I thought cyst, it felt like cyst after reading the report. I mean, the spelling mistakes and the grammar and the mana whenua section didn't leave me much confidence. But what are the pinch points, Tyler, you mentioned before? Because I think I identify them when I read the report, but what are they?
I think some of those more challenging areas that we'll have to converse a bit further will be the future of vehicles on the beach. There's good alignment around vehicles in the dunes. We asked a question in our community survey, which just closed, so I couldn't include the results in this report. But one question was, should vehicles continue to be allowed on the beach? And there was a 1 to 10 scale, and our votes were equally split between 1 and 10. So I think that speaks to the degree to which people feel strongly about the issue and which they are split down the middle. It's also timely, you know, it's just been the racing season, but there have been strong views on each side around the impact of the beach races on the dune system, the motorcycle beach races, that is, and whether that can be mitigated further. I think those two really key pinch points where there isn't full alignment in the people that we've been talking to.
Question. Is this budgeted for, and what is the cost associated with this? When I read this, my initial response was, this is overkill. I then processed it, and obviously there are a lot of issues at play, but is it intended that major other beaches in the town are going to require a master plan, or?
The master plan is budgeted for, and I would say it's probably a level of resource similar to has been spent on other beaches over time. Wainui Beach through the Leisner Reserve management plan has that level of planning. We have done similar spatial or reserve management planning exercises for the town beaches and Kopututia. It's something that's been asked for a long time, but yeah, it's certainly, it is still resource intensive.
Thank you, Your Worship.
So I would like to come back. If this is not moved, I would love to move it. I thought Pat might have decided. So you move it and I'll second it. But I do want to reiterate what Councillor Seymour said here today. And I do want to take this opportunity to thank Councillor Seymour for the journey she has walked alongside the Makorori community. And Councillor Foster, lots of us have been invited over time. I had the privilege to meet with the community on more than one occasion to see the damage that has been done. And I know there are active discussions with Waka Kotahi as well, because those bollards will make a big difference. And I know it's not just a straightforward process once we have other organisations that walk alongside us, but I do want to reiterate again, that is something practical that the community has asked for quite some time, the bollards. And if we can keep on pushing that, that would be fantastic. And then I do want to also just acknowledge the Makorori community who brought this to our attention a good 10 years ago, but then in the last 2 years have been very active and have attended these workshops with Exist, worked alongside them. And so Tyler, I just want to say thank you for the work that's been done, and I look forward to us making sure those bollards go up alongside Waka Kotahi to protect that area. And I agree with Councillor Seymour in regards to the wharepakus as well. Thank you, and I second this.
Thank you, Councillor Worcester.
Thank you. My initial thoughts were much like Tony's. This looks very expensive plan. Could we just not get on with things like the bollards? And so I went and dug up, because I've had comments over the years about the Rere community plan or something to the community, and how that was obviously probably kicked off with a hiss and a war much the same way this is. And so I went and revisited that, and to be fair to council, actually a lot of the things that were in that plan had actually been delivered. I'm not sure that the intent wasn't necessarily to follow the plan, but it has evolved more or less along the lines that the plan laid out. My, I guess, observation would be that that plan has now not been revisited though since 2010. So in terms of the expense that goes into this, and it gives us a roadmap, it is also, I think, quite important to keep in mind that actually you do need to kind of, yes, deliver something, mostly more than just a plan, but also keep revisiting it, because there are now things in, for example, the Rere one, that possibly don't fit 12 years on. So I'm actually more supportive of this after doing a little bit of homework than I was initially. And I just want to say, well, I really look forward to seeing the stuff that is outlined here being delivered. Like probably everybody else, I think it's going to come at a cost, and the community's going to have to decide whether they want to front that. But yeah, thank you for the report. I have to be excused too, if that's okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Councillor Worsnop did advise me that she would be leaving at 11, and I said we might be through the meeting, but we're not. So thanks, Gary. Yeah. Councillor Arkwright-Brown, Councillor Foster's had a speak, but if he's got new information, I might allow him another.
Thank you.
Councillor
It's
Arkwright-Brown
important.
first.
I just, on the note, Councillor Worsnop just said, really, I was just thinking, is there an equity lens? With all due respect, each environment ecologically and the biodiverse sense of it has its needs, and we know that. But I just know that often when people see parts of region get some work done in a master plan, as great as this is, and significantly needed, because we know there's we talked of it's been on the books for a while. But do we look through a lens of equity across the sector of beaches? Because you get people complain and say they get that and we didn't get that and all that type of discussions. But
yeah, you're off topic again.
Depends, today's not my day. Okay, well, let me say this then. Thank you for the plan. Thank you for the master plan it is. Will there be a master plan for other beaches?
Yeah, it's a process that we're going through at the moment to stock take a bit of a livable spaces strategic framework, so determine what planning instruments we have in council that affect our delivery of livable spaces, how we use our current planning tools and what our needs are beyond that, and that will be an assessment of where further planning is required. Always have to be careful because you can create industries planning, and they are the right tool for the right job. And in the instance of Makorori, this is about the sustainable management of a regional destination, and really our thinking that sits in the community facility strategy around equity, around access for all and inclusion filters right through our thinking in that plan as well.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foster,
Yeah,
you have
thank
something
you.
new.
I just would like to remind everyone the significance of Makorori Beach. Makorori Beach has got 3 surf breaks of national significance in the national coastal policy statement. It is the only beach in New Zealand that has 3 surf breaks of that significant. So that is huge, you know, and we need to protect this beach and enhance this beach as much as possible. It has the possibility, and we've always, you know, me personally and a couple of other councillors have always promoted the fact that this should be a national surfing reserve dedicated to the sport of surfing, and which would encourage other beach users as well. But that is the potential for this beach. So please, you know, don't underestimate the significance of this beach.
Thank you. Been moved by Councillor Seymour and certainly.
Comments made, that I would like to respond to. So for those who wonder about beach management plans, this putting in place a management plan was actually deemed to be the most appropriate tool to consider a whole range of issues around Makorori Beach, rather than randomly perhaps responding to bollards and the additional access ways that were put in place by various users of the beach during the winter of that began in the autumn of 2020. There were 14 new access points made on State Highway 35, and the Mayor has heard me raise that frequently with Waka Kotahi. And Waka Kotahi's initial response was to reduce the speed limit, along with support from some members of the public, down to 80 k's, rather than actually say, like they have done in the past. Councillor Burdett and I can see that there are places still there where they did actually close off some access ways about 10 years ago. And they dumped some metal or put some railings in, but the next response was to reduce the speed limit. And for those who might be concerned, so it was to give protection to that environment, because we do have an obligation as a regional council to look after our environment. It is very much public use, so we want to see public use be available, surfers and whānau and their children. And so those were some really important things. And I also want to remind you that when we decided to bollard Wainui Okatu, it happened without out any much fuss at all, but they did go through quite a long planning process. So we have a management plan around Wainui. It might be time for renew, I don't know. But the bollards went in there, and this is what this management plan has stemmed from, the request to limit access so that all of the issues can be considered. And I don't think that the actual implementation is going to be hugely expensive, because if you actually look at what capital outlay there will be apart from the bollards, it might be some tables and chairs and some parking, and the parking areas won't be sealed all at once or whatever. So it's not like it's huge costly infrastructure putting in place. It's some protection of our biodiversity and our coastal environment, which we are obligated to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Move Councillor Seymour and second by Mayor Stoltz. All those in favour? Against? Carried. And now we're on to the Cobham School Neighbourhood Play System, page 65. Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Karakia. Is it a presentation? Is it? No. Is it? Just speak into it. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay, Anna's going to speak to this report, assisted by Tyler, possibly.
Kia ora anō. So I guess as a contextual piece, through the last long-term plan deliberations, this council resolved that we would work with Sport Gisborne, Tairāwhiti and Etu Elgin to improve play opportunities in the neighbourhood. Noting the long battle fought to try and find more equitable public play space in Elgin, and the many challenges that we face in doing so. It's not an easy solution. We have, from that point, taken a two-part approach, working with community, and the efforts have been those of many, and council has played a very minor role. We have supported, but realistically, this is community helping itself with a little bit of our help. So there have been some short-term solutions, like Etu Elgin seeking funding for a mobile play trailer in which they plan to test various neighbourhood parks for their suitability for more permanent play infrastructure, like Elgin School upgrading their playground. And then there is a longer-term view to looking at systematically, and why I'm quite excited to have Anna here to speak about the neighbourhood play system, considering play beyond playgrounds and parks, but actually the entire urban system and the factors that enable and prevent play for tamariki living in Elgin.
Kia ora Tyler. Ko Anna Tolich tōku ingoa, kei Sport Gisborne, Tairāwhiti, me Healthy Families East Cape, aho e mahi ana. My kids say I have the best job in the world. I am the Regional Play Systems Lead. It's a role from Sport New Zealand, and I get to uphold the mana of Takaro. We were lucky enough to be chosen as one of 4 regional sports trusts to test a model from Sport New Zealand called the Neighbourhood Play System. It was created with them through Arup, which is an international design firm, and it was looking at what does play look like for our tamariki beyond their letterbox on their way to their school. It places a 800-metre footprint over the top of a school, and it captures everything that's happening within that footprint, looking at the built environment, trees, roads, and trying to look at the barriers and the opportunities that could be created. It's quite a radical approach to urban design, that it places our tamariki at the centre of the design process. They are the co-leaders. We were given a very complex model by Sport New Zealand to test out first, but what the reality on the ground was about getting the tamariki around the table with some brown paper and lots of ideas, and understanding the day-to-day reality for them living in their neighbourhood. So we already had a relationship with Cobham School through our Manawa Kura team at Sport Gisborne Tairāwhiti, which is our Healthy Active Learning team, and also through Healthy Families East Cape. So we leveraged off that relationship and went in and held 3 play workshops with the tamariki. So the first play workshop was really understanding how they like to play, and it was all building up that whanaungatanga and building up that safe space for them to really understand what it's like living in their neighbourhood. So they shared with us that they love to go to the beach and play with their whānau, but they have to be driven to parks and places. There's nowhere for them to play in Elgin. As you know, Elgin has the unenviable title of the play desert. There's no public playground there. So they shared all the great spaces they like to go. We also got them to tell us how they feel about when they play, and that was really eye-opening. You think most kids would tick the happy box, but a lot of kids are worried and feel scared with play in their neighbourhood. There's no safe space for them to play. They're not allowed by their parents to roam and go visit their friends down the road due to fear of the unsafe feeling of safety, and also a lot of roaming dogs and busy roads. So that was an eye-opener for us. Our second workshop looked at where they like to play. So we got them to mind map their journey from home to school. And that's where we understood a lot of them live right directly around Cobham School. A lot of them have gates into the school, and they use the school as a safe space to go and play. A lot of them go there after hours and the weekends. A lot of them like just to lie in the grass. That's their quiet, safe space, and that's where they all meet up to play. We also got them to rate pictures of around the neighbourhood where they like to go. They're quite parochial. They won't go and play at the new Elgin school playground. They like to stay in their hood. And there's places that they don't like to go to Blackpool Park. They felt unsafe there. So we're starting to build up this picture. The third workshop we went in with them was the penny drop moment for us. That's when they took us on a neighbourhood walk around the neighbourhood, and they led it. I gave them, my background as a landscape architect, so I gave them a 5-minute, this is what an urban designer is, workshop. I'll quickly explain that to you. I drew a river on a whiteboard, asked them, how would you get from one side of the river to the other? And they came up with the usual, we'll build a raft, build a bridge. And I said, look, this is Disneyland. You can go crazy, come up with some great ideas. They built catapults and flying foxes. And I said, right, you're urban designers. We're going to go out into your neighborhood now, find the places that you love. And they had a love heart picture to show us the places that they loved. But we also had a Band-Aid picture to show us the pictures that were broken and needed fixing. And that's the places that they urban design fixed on the spot. So they walked us around the neighbourhood, and there are 5 key spaces. We started with the playground, and that playground needs quite a lot of work. It's broken, and they came up with the idea of a new playground in that space for the community. Lots more plants and trees in there that they would like to take care of. And that started to build this idea of this papatakaro, or school ground play for the community. Then we went out into Munro Street. So the school has an alleyway straight onto that street, and the kids directly told us that they do not like to go on that street. They've seen quite a lot of violence on that street. They don't like the dogs. Their parents won't let them walk along and roam. But just basic things like they can't scooter from their friend's house along because the footpath is all broken up. So they'd like to see that fixed. They'd like some signs to slow people down. And probably the best quote that we got from the kids was one girl said that she'd love to have trees with her name on it. She liked the idea of having a street tree that was hers and she owned it. And we talked about this idea of a legacy project, something that they would come back and visit. The ideas they come with, if they happen, they can look after them and own them and come back and visit them, even with their whānau and future generations. The third space that we visited was Blackpool Park, and they were immediately drawn to Reynolds Creek, or Reynolds Drain as it is officially known. They do love to go there a lot with their whānau and play there. They do like the tuna in there, they like the water, but they wanted it cleaned up. It was full of rubbish. They wanted it to smell better. They like the idea of more eels in there and planting and a swing over the creek. So again, the idea of that sense of ownership, we asked them who would undertake this mahi, and they put their arms out wide and said, we'll do it. So they already wanted to take hold of that one. And then we went over to Elgin Shops. There was nowhere for them to cross. There's no pedestrian crossing there. They're not allowed to go to the shops by themselves for that reason. They would like to have some signs there just to slow the traffic down and to help them get across the road. They also wanted to activate the shops with a play layer. In the back is quite a big car park, and they had great ideas about grassing it and putting some play spaces there, maybe a stage, some Wi-Fi. So just creating that community gathering space. And the final space we came around the loop was to the abandoned rail corridor, the Makorori rail corridor. That backs directly onto their school, and it's full of horses, which the kids quite like. They had a great idea there of cleaning up all the prickles, glass and weeds. That's why they don't go in there. and putting a pathway somewhere that they could scooter off-road and bike, which they don't have in the neighbourhood. But they also respected the idea of the heritage of the rail, and they wanted a big train they could play on. So they're already getting that urban design thinking, respecting all the layers of place and coming up with some cool ideas. So the 5 key ideas that the tamariki came up with through testing out this prototype were papatakaro, so the idea of a school ground play for all the community, tiara takaro, this idea of play on the way, so the idea of manaki from their house to their school through street trees, upgraded footpaths, and they even talked about signs te waharoa at the gateway to the school. Takaro taio, the idea of nature play and restoring Reynolds Creek. Takaro hapori, this is village play, the idea of upgrading, putting a play layer on the Algon shops for all of the community. And huarahi takaro, this idea of play corridors, what does it look like as an active transport and connecting them to all the amazing facilities that they right now don't have access to. They don't have access to the off-road bike track, to the beach due to the blockage from the industrial zone. So some 5 key opportunities that the tamariki have come up with. One exciting next step from there is that they've already undertaken some planting at Reynolds Creek through the Enviro schools. That was awesome. They said they felt good to look after something. They already knew which was their tree. They were going to come back and visit it. And from that, we've grown a gardening group where they we're going to get some gardening gear for them together, and they're going to take ownership of that space. So this was a prototype that we've been testing with Cobham School. At this stage, we haven't had, the next steps will be to do appropriate hapu iwi engagement going forward. This report has gone to iwi chairs, but those will be the next steps. And again, it will be tamariki led. It would be great for them to present. And in terms of small steps, we'd lovely for councillors new and old to go on a walk with the tamariki around as well. So thank you.
Well, thanks for that. Talk about saving the best for last. That's awesome. That's just fantastic. I've been around here for a while, and Elgin's always been a problem. We had this policy where you had to have the ability to walk to a play area within 700 metres of your home, and Elgin's always been a fail on that. We just couldn't accommodate it. So it's great to see this work and great to see the collaboration with the kids. I mean, out of the mouths of babes come the solutions, you know. So no, that's fantastic. Councillor Wharekina.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First off, I really want to thank council for making this a priority. You know, as someone that grew up in Elgin, please, it's crazy that I'm 41 years old and these are still some of the things that our kids are suffering from in Elgin, and their infrastructural, their design, their planning things that the kids are suffering from, the lack of treescape, the lack of parks and things like that. So I really want to commend us actually for putting that in terms of our thing. I want to thank yourself too, Tyler, for being the person on behalf of council that tries to make that space permissive. You know, yeah, really want to thank you, and also yourself, Anna and Ranui. So for those who don't know Ranui, it's Ranui Maxwell here from Healthy Families East Cape. Yeah, awesome work, awesome example of what a really good joint venture community project can look like. Really want to endorse it. Have no questions because I know so much about this, so I'll leave the question time for the rest of my colleagues, but thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Like my colleague, I want to acknowledge the mahi that has resulted in this. This is a stellar piece of mahi. The report, I have to say, is probably the best report I've ever read at council. It flowed, it was word perfect. As a wordsmith, you know, there was not a word wasted. It was as a you're a wordsmith, right? What you do, and it was just a wonderful report to read. To see that it was rangatahi led. It was a new approach. It was a radical approach that we vied for and succeeded in getting this project, this pilot project in Tairāwhiti, is just fantastic all round, and everyone involved needs to be congratulated and acknowledged for it. So excited. Wonderful to see my dear friend Gina. She's a great person, eh? And yeah, this is just wonderful. So thank you so much for your mate.
Thank you. Councillor Gregory.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great report and project. I just have a question around, it's called Algon Neighbourhood Play System, but Algon School doesn't seem to be involved in it. And so when I look at the numbers of kids in the area, also like preschools, I don't know, mother groups, whatever, how do we know what the population is doing there also? And yeah, mostly I was just concerned, what is this about Algon School? Why is that's surely part of Algon as well?
Yes, I totally agree. And I put the argument towards Sport New Zealand, but they wanted just the one school to concentrate to test this out to start with. It's now been rolled across New Zealand, and the idea is that we would then go to Algon and incorporate them in. And so the idea is that each school would get a neighbourhood play system around them, and then that would all weave together to create a play layer across the whole region.
Councillor Seymour.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the paper. Mine is just a minor add-on, picking up one of the comments you made about not safe access to the facilities that we are putting down at beachfront. So I'd just like to put back to council officers. We are looking in a longer term plan of having safe access to Waikanae. So couldn't we also look at having a safe access along Stanley Road from Algon to those facilities that are down at the beach, an upgraded footpath, and there's probably quite a bit of room there to do something about that. So to build on the good work that is going to be done with this facility and upgrade Algon area, and I won't just use school or Cobham, the Algon area for user friendly, then we're going to have very good facilities down at the beachfront. We should make it accessible to those kids. It's not that far. And so can that be thought about in our grand plans, please?
Through the chair, to be something that have to be included in the long-term plan discussions going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes. No?
I'll go. And my question is just around obviously next steps in implementing this. Understanding that we do collect rates from the Algon region for reserves and things like that, but don't have access to. How do we set that aside in our budget going forward so that we can actually help contribute to this? Because I can see that there's also some co-applying for Waka Kote streets for people. But do we have anything specifically in our budget at the moment for actual delivery of this in Algon?
Yeah, through the chair. So as noted, there are pieces of work that we can support through our current activities and budget lines. Some of the bigger ticket items would require consultation and budget allocation through the next long-term plan. And so it's timely to be having this conversation and firming up some of our thoughts around improving urban living in Algon at this point as we head into those conversations next year.
Awesome. Thank you. Councillor Shelton.
Thank you. I too grew up in Lytton Road and have had a bit of an interest in Sport Gisborne in my life. But the question really, I think Debbie stole my thunder bit, was around where's the Ministry of Education within this, really, was what my question was going to be.
Through the Ministry of Education, probably as a stakeholder that would come in the next steps. So at the moment it's been tamariki led and everything has to go past Gina. Right. So that would be my first level of Ministry of Education part, but they have been at Sport New Zealand level, have been talked to about this process. And they're part of the Manamakura team in terms of their Ministry of Education as well. So we've leveraged off that relationship, and I think it's something that Sport New Zealand will take to them.
Yeah, no, and excellent paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Congratulations, a fantastic report. Great to see this happening in Melbourne, well overdue. My question is around the rail corridor. I mean, it's a really integral part of the active transport network, but it is also actually an ongoing rail line. So what is the conversation we're having with NZ Rail? Is there a possibility of a joint ownership, or can it be beautiful? I mean, because at the moment, anything that owns by NZ Rail is derelict and no upgrade, and that's totally reflective of this area in particular. It's it's a terrible environment, and it needs to be upgraded, and it's a perfect corridor. But how do we work with NZ Rail to achieve that? I mean, I guess in the future, and I see it a lot of other places, you could have in use with the vintage train or whatever and still being upgraded. But at the moment, it's just terrible.
Kia ora, I totally agree. When I presented this at the Green Pav Recreation Aotearoa Conference in Dunedin, which is mostly to other councils around New Zealand and consultants, they all loved that part of the project and thought it was an amazing asset. There is some exciting things happening in that space. There are a group of stakeholders around that. That's an iwi League project, so I'll let them speak to it when the time is right. But rest assured, there are some very exciting things coming.
Councillor Akawata.
I too just want to thank you so much for the mahi in this space, Tyler and team, regarding Elgin. I spent 10 years working with inspiring communities, so this is inspiring communities in action, and so it's great because Munro Street won beautiful street, the most beautiful street in Gisborne in 2008. And whenever I see that sign up there, I'm always reminded that those parts of our community just need, again, a little bit more kind of impetus to know that they can be part. So I'm really grateful to hear you talking of, talking to the youngins about what it feels like, because I did a whole bunch of mahi in London Street. So I totally know what you're dealing with in this space. I'm going to keep on topic because otherwise almost over here will just jump at me. So I just want to ask you, when you talk of this project, does it have an extension too? Because I see, we've got that walkway, cycleway that's been built there, and all of the frameworks that come into it. Because I think in ownership, the connections across hapu, with regard to these young people, those are going to be some of the wonderful adages for them to know that they're part of a bigger part of the region, not just Elgin. But I'm grateful that you've talked to Gina. She's fabulous, and I've been really excited. I have had a little bit of a role with Etu Elgin, very minute, but so that's my conflict in a sense, but I'm not conflicted because it's all wonderful. So will this project from a Sport New Zealand adage kind of consider the widening scope, as we mentioned with Elgin School, etc.?
Yes, Lee, that's the big vision, is to grow it, the idea of a footprint around each school and to meet them all up. And we were lucky we got $10,000 to prototype this. So still have, we've only spent a little bit on the kai so far. So there's opportunity there to test some stuff out. I also have another hat. I'm in the Streets for People Waka Kotahi team. So we can take some of that learning and maybe test that out in this space as well. So definitely grow it. Definitely connect it all up into the system and giving the community the sense of ownership too.
Thanks, that's awesome. I feel like we've just had a big meal and Tyler and Anna report the pavlova and ice cream. Thanks, that's been fantastic. It's been moved by Councillor Robinson and second by Councillor Hughes. All those in favour? Against? Oh no, was it Josh? Sorry, it was Josh. No, it was Josh. Yeah. Yeah. All those in favour? Carried. All right, we do have public excluded, but it's only minutes, so I'd just like to have a bit of a word before we finish, and that's because it's our last meeting of the Operations Committee. So firstly, I'd like to thank the staff for putting up with us. Nadine, Dave and Michelle, thanks very much. Been a good committee, and then I'd like to thank my co-chair, Larry. Good. And all the councillors. There's a few of you that have put us in a really difficult position for the next 3 years. We are losing so much talent, and I'd just like to thank that talent that's been around this table for quite a long time, and some not so long time, but there's an extraordinary amount of talent we're losing. So that's a challenge for us going forward. There's no doubt about it. So thank you for your service, everyone that's been. And I won't go on because we do have a nice formal little farewell coming up, which we can really get verbose at. So, yes. So thanks very much. And right, public excluded. Moved by Councillor Burdett, second by Your Worship.